The legacy of Pope Pius XI and the XII have long been of great controversy among people who study the issues relating to the Holocaust and the Second World War. And it's a former Romanian intelligence chief, Ion Pacepa, and Ronald Rychlak, a professor at the University of Mississippi Law School, who have recently written a book called Disinformation, which seeks to shed light on the Soviet disinformation program that besmirched the legacy of especially Pope Pius XI. Can you tell Pope Pius XII. Can you tell us, Professor Rychlak, what is new in these revelations about the Pope and the Soviet power at the time?
Well, certainly. I think what Pacepa's story brings to this whole matter is sort of suddenly things begin to make sense. Those of us who've studied Pope Pius XII for a very long time understood that during the war, after the war, at the time of his death, even for several years after the time of his death, he was praised, and he was heralded as a champion of the Jews. The New York Times said he was the lonely voice crying out of the silence of a continent. The leaders of the new state of Israel thanked him, and at the time of his death, tributes came in from all over. And then suddenly a play comes about in 1963, and somehow that changes everything. And why does that change everything? How can a piece of fiction do something like that? And we've all ever since then been doing this study and doing this work and trying to figure out why the reputation changed so dramatically. And Pacepa comes in and plugs in this piece that at first a lot of people, including myself, said, I don't know, that seems a little far-fetched. But I spent 2 years of research looking into this and before I wrote anything. Then I wrote a chapter in the second edition of my book, Hitler, the War, and the Pope, where I explored this idea, and suddenly a lot of things that had not made sense made sense. And the Pacepa then got in touch with me, and we've worked together. And the more I've worked, the more I've seen how there was an active disinformation campaign designed to ultimately undercut Western values, but doing it by attacking the Church through the already deceased Pope, Pius XII.
Now, does this change the perception on the part of many people that the Pope Pius XII actually never did call upon Christians to save the Jews from extermination? It was not only the Pope, but also, for example, President Roosevelt, who were made aware of extermination camps, for example.
Well, they absolutely were. And when you go back and you study the history, the thing we know, and the thing we've known for a long time, is Pius XII, for instance, sent messages into Poland, and the leaders in Poland looked at them and burned them and said, if we read this, it'll cause more people to die. A similar thing happened in Holland, where the leaders, in fact, came out with statements against the Nazis, and more people died. And so Pius XII was walking this fine line, trying to figure out what could he do to help. And we have records now to show he helped a lot of people leave Nazi-occupied areas. He helped hide a lot of people, particularly in Italy, where he had the greatest ability to do that kind of stuff. And he was told by some people, yes, you should be more outspoken. He's told by other people, no, if you're more outspoken, people will die. And he was trying to navigate that very carefully. The people close to him, the Jewish leaders, particularly those in Rome, understood how profoundly he worked on behalf of Jews and other downtrodden people, people who were being persecuted by the Nazis.
Can you cite one of those leaders of the Jewish community in Italy, for example?
Well, I mean, the most famous one would be the chief rabbi of Rome, Israel Zoli, who after the war, in fact, converted to Catholicism. He had a true religious conversion. He wrote a book about it. But so it was not a matter just of thanking the Pope, but he also did then take Eugenio, Pius XII's Christian name, as his Christian name, had the Pope act as his sponsor, his godfather, what you want to call it, and wrote with great tribute about all the Jews they had that the Pope and the Catholic Church had saved.
But what in your book, though, what are some of the revelations about the Soviet inroads in propaganda and propagandizing this idea of collaboration between the Pope and Hitler?
Well, that's really been an interesting new area of research for me to begin, instead of looking at late 1930s to 1945, to start looking at the late 1950s into the 1960s, and to begin to see how the Soviet Union used theater, used literature in a battle of ideology against the West, but particularly against the Catholic Church. The Church, by the way, was doing some back. There was a comic book that they used to give to kids at Catholic schools back then called Treasure Chest. And you can look this up online. Treasure Chest from 1960 is all about anti-communism and pretty much ridicules Khrushchev, if you pull it up and look at it. But the Soviets were doing the same thing. They were infiltrating newspapers and magazines. They were planting articles. They were producing false histories. There's a notorious guy who was behind this particular story as well with Pius XII, who made his way up through the ranks of Soviet intelligence by writing false histories. And when you see this very detailed organization that was working toward continually trying to put forth a story to make someone look good or make someone look bad, because they also would try to build up Soviet leaders at the time. It's just amazing to watch how they got their tentacles all over the place and were able to sway popular opinion about something as dramatic. And Pius XII's reputation flipped dramatically over the course of just a couple years once they got in, not just the play, but the play, the publishers, the translators, the magazines, the reviews. When those kind of things came up, they didn't really care about the play. They cared about pressing forth this idea, and they did that very hard.
Now, what accounts for the persistence of this view of a collaboration between Hitler and the Pope? Wasn't he actually posed with a moral dilemma if he had spoken out more strongly about the Jews? Would it not have meant expropriation of property? What was he valuing more in making these decisions?
I don't think it had to do with property. I mean, I think if you look at what he said, and we look at his actions and what he said, he was very concerned about human life, and he was worried first and foremost. Pope John the 23rd said, first and foremost, that Pius XII told me to protect human lives, and I think that's what he was trying to do. And how you navigate that, how you protect people from the Nazis, how you let them in the Vatican, you let them in church properties, you change rules. And we have pictures of people in Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer home, where they're not only in every room and every hallway, they're sleeping up and down staircases, because that was the only place they could hide. And the Pope had to grant his permission to allow that to happen and make sure that that did happen. And you're trying to do all those things and not push the Nazis to the point where they kick open the doors and come in and round them up, which happened a couple times. A couple places there's situations where, but not many. And the Pope was walking that line.
Well, thanks very much. We've been speaking to Professor Ronald Rychlak of the University of Mississippi College of Law, and I'm Martin Barrios reporting for Sparrow News. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Martin.